from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S. That's Rich Valdez on all of the social media, and happy to be here with you. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, feel free to pull up a chair, kick up your feet, and enjoy the show. I'm here with you till 1 a.m. Eastern, so that's the next 3 hours. Whether you're on the West Coast or the East Coast, I'm happy to be with you. I know we've welcomed some new affiliates. We got about 5 new stations that are joining us, all from the Midwest to the West Coast. So welcome to the conversation, familia. Happy to have you here. Again, our telephone number, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. And we're going to talk about FBI lies. Christopher Wray, he gets grilled on Capitol Hill today. We're going to talk about that. We're talking about Biden flopping in Lithuania. We're going to get into that a little bit as well. Plus, a little bit later on, some conversation on what is going on with I guess it's a bill. I don't want to use the wrong word here, but a bill that Bernie Sanders and the crazy lefties in Congress are proposing that would actually raise drug costs. We'll get to that in the next hour. I also want to nail down a few different topics. We've got a bunch of things from immigration laws and issues that are happening down at the border to the Chris Wray situation that I mentioned. We're going to get to that. So lots to discuss, not the least of which at the bottom of the hour number 2, we're going to talk about some human trafficking topics, because that's always a hot topic and something we never neglect to talk about here on this program. But I want to start, right? So anybody who is busy all day and taking care of your family, working, doing all those things that you do on a Wednesday, then it's understood that you may not have heard all of these hours of testimony that were provided by FBI Director Christopher Wray to members of Congress today. But we have a couple of clips for you that you may have heard parts of. I'm going to try and give you the full context of these clips so that you can make decisions for yourself when you're given all the information. The first of which, and again, eye-opening, nothing very surprising, but definitely eye-opening. The first of which is Representative Tom Tiffany having a discussion or questioning FBI Director Chris Wray at the hearing today. And Wray emphatically saying that, no, the FBI will not be interfering in elections. Lamentably, we've seen this happen in the past. Listen to this.
So as a result of the actions of James Comey, the disgraced James Comey, and the FBI, they've interfered with the elections in both 2016 and 2020. Will that interference happen again in 2024 by the FBI?
The FBI is not going to be interfering in elections.
They did in 2016.
Well, I don't know that that's what Mr. Durham found. What I would tell you again is that there was conduct that I consider unacceptable and unrepresentative.
You can be in denial if you want to.
I'm not in denial,
Mr. Director,
sir.
you can be in denial on this. That's exactly what happened.
Yet I remember that happening, right? I don't know about you guys. I totally remember that happening. And it didn't end there. I mean, there was lots of conversation. Everybody, was there at the oversight hearing today, taking a swing at Director Wray, and rightfully so. All right? A lot of things have happened on his watch, and I think a lot of people have questions. Now, Florida Representative Matt Gaetz turns to Director Wray, asking him regarding Hunter Biden, and text messages asking, listen, are you protecting the Biden crime family? Listen to this.
I'm sitting here with my father. I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sounds like a shakedown, doesn't it, Director?
I'm not going to get into commenting on that.
You seem deeply uncurious about it, don't you? Almost suspiciously uncurious. Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI
well, you
does
won't
not
answer the
and has
question.
no
Hold on.
interest in
You won't answer the
protecting
question
anyone
about whether or not
politically.
that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it. Because to the millions of people who will see this, they know it is. And your inability to acknowledge that is deeply revealing about you.
Matt Gaetz nailing it like he usually does. Absolutely. The director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, this is his MO. And again, I think, so many of us have become accustomed to hearing, I'm not at liberty to discuss that. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to do that. Well, without revealing our sources and methods, we're not able to do that. Well, right now, we can't comment on ongoing investigations. And I'd say, I don't know, maybe half the people, maybe even 75% of the people hear that and go, well, listen, he's the FBI director. I mean, it's a big deal. This guy can't tell you everything, and that's just that. He has security clearance. It's above our pay grade, right? And everybody just, accepts that. And then there's people that are like, I don't give a damn. I don't have any clearance. I don't care about your pay grades. I don't care about anything. I want to know what's going on. And I think then there's other people that are in the middle, which is more like me. I'm just like, let's strive for the truth. Let's just strive for the truth and try not to get caught in your lies. And lamentably, that seems to be what's going on here, where people are just getting caught out there. And it's really just an expose on how messed up things are, right? On how badly things are going. Now, I want to get into a clip from Representative Jim Jordan, but it probably would be a little bit too long and push us beyond the time frame before we have to take our pause. So what I'm going to do instead, I want to stay on this theme of lies within the FBI, because I think it's important that we focus on truth, right? It's I guess it's not in vogue, it's not in style, but it's still equally as important as it ever was, right? We have to stand up for what is right. We have to believe in the truth. And I hate to sound like I'm, preaching virtue here, but it's just interesting. Recently, I was perusing through some of the writings of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and in his book, The Gulag Archipelago, there's a quote, and I'm going to read it to you, and I think it fits here so well. Listen to this. Gradually, it was disclosed to me that the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart and through all human hearts. This line shifts. It's inside us. It oscillates with the years. And even within the hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained. And even in the best of all hearts, there remains an uprooted small corner of evil. Unuprooted small corner of evil. Since then, I've come to understand the truth of all the religions of the world. They struggle with the evil inside a human being, inside every human being. It's impossible to expel evil from the world in its entirety, but it is possible to constrict it within each person. And I think that is the goal that so many of us, at least listeners to this program, people that I deal with on a regular basis, that's the world we live in, where we strive for the truth, where we strive to do what's right. We don't go out of our way to lie, and we just have an expectation that others are going to treat us the way we'd like to be treated. The golden rule. And lamentably, that's not the case in society anymore, in many neighborhoods, and definitely not in Washington, D.C. And those hearings today are just so illustrative of the problem that we have. The solution, I leave that to all of us and to figure out how we go about it, kind of like what Solzhenitsyn was just pointing at. It's a condition of the heart within each person. Anyway, getting off my soapbox, we're going to come back with former Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. Everybody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
But
right.
you're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. I want to continue our discussion on the Christopher Wray hearing today because, again, lots of questions were asked, lots of things were discussed. And let's see here. I wanted to pick up. I said I had this, and I wanted to get to it before the break, and we'll do it before we bring in the guest. So let's do this Jim Jordan exchange with Christopher Wray. Of course, Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, congressman from Ohio, and really opening the door here for a very important conversation where earlier this year we learned that the FBI had sources and undercover agents embedded inside of Catholic churches trying to root out violent domestic extremists, or what they were calling rad-trad Catholics, radical traditionalist Catholics. I find this remarkable. Never heard of such a thing, but I guess it's once you create the term, a rad-trad, then it's like, oh, what kind of Catholic are you? I'm a rad-trad. Oh, I'm just a regular one. Yeah, now there's all these types that, again, I had no idea this existed. And I'm not Catholic per se. I grew up Catholic, but kind of got married in a Pentecostal church and stayed in the evangelical realm since then. But lover of Jesus nonetheless. And I think it's a very dangerous place to go when you try to radicalize traditional Catholics by saying that traditional Catholics are radical, or what they call radical traditional Catholics, because they'll do that as they have with other religions, and I think there's nowhere for it to stop. Now, if somebody's thinking, well, when they did it to the Muslims, you didn't complain, Rich. Well, yeah, I didn't complain because those people were blowing things up. What are the Catholics blowing up? Right. Well, what makes them radical and traditional? What is the difference between them? Well, Jim Jordan points that out. Listen to this.
What's the difference between a traditional Catholic and a radical traditional Catholic?
I'm not an expert on the Catholic orders.
Well, your FBI wrote a memo talking about radical traditional Catholics. I'm just wondering if you could define it for us.
Well, what I can tell you is you're referring to the Richmond product, which was a single product by a single field office, which as soon as I found out about it, I was aghast and ordered it withdrawn and removed from FBI systems.
You were aghast, then why won't you let us talk to the people who put it together?
We are working on finishing an internal review into what happened
We have to wait. We, the Congress, and the American people have to wait until you do an internal review. It's not a criminal investigation going on here. An internal review before we can talk to the people who wrote this?
When we finish our internal review, which will be very soon, we will come back
idea how
before
many
the
Catholics
committee
in America?
and provide a briefing on what we found.
Well, we appreciate the briefing, but we want to talk to the people who wrote it. Any idea how many Catholics there are in America, Director?
No, sir.
There's a lot, over 60 million. What percentage of those are radical traditional Catholics, according to the Richmond Field Office of the FBI?
Again, that product is not something that I will defend or excuse. It's something that I thought was appalling and removed it.
Let's read from that product, page 4 of that product. By the way, the copy you gave us, when can we get a copy that didn't have all these redactions on it so we can actually see what the American taxpayers were paying for to see their rights, their First Amendment religious liberty rights attacked? Let me just read from page 4. Provide new opportunities to mitigate extremist threat through outreach to traditional Catholic parishes and the development of sources with the placement and access to report on places of worship. That's pretty fancy language for they're trying to put informants in the parish, in the church. That's what this memorandum said, Director, from one of your field offices. And you won't let us talk to the people who did it. Any response to that?
I didn't know. I was waiting for the question.
No, you think priests should be informants inside the church, Director?
We do not recruit, open, or operate confidential human sources to infiltrate, target, report.
But that's not what this said. It sounds like you were trying to do it in Richmond, Virginia.
No, sir. No, sir.
You weren't? This didn't happen? You can assure us that this didn't happen?
That product did not, to as best as we can tell, result in any investigative action as a result of it. None.
That's the conversation that I wanted you to hear. Again, this is astounding to me. Really is. And again, I'm not one that capitalizes on the sale of my own righteous indignation, right? I'm really a kind of mellow guy when it comes to these things. My friends, my family, they're, literally smoke coming out of their ears. They're turning red. My brothers, they freak out about this stuff. And they love some of the more outrageous commentators out there that you can like only find on the internet on these obscure channels. And they're always telling me, you got to be more like that guy, Richie. You got to be like that guy. Have some passion. But anyway, the bottom line here is I don't take that stuff very good, but I find this to be absolute insanity that you have the FBI director here on the hot seat, really sweating under the collar in this exchange with Representative Jordan, where he seems unable to really delineate what the FBI considered to be a radical traditionalist Catholic versus any other kind of Catholic. And if you can't make that distinction at the highest level, i.e. the FBI director, then how is anybody else expected to make that difference? And are we led to believe that we do, in fact, have the FBI spying on everyone and anyone they feel like within the Catholic Church? Now, this, I think, is one of the most egregious things that we've seen come out of this. So I'm glad that happened, but there's plenty more to discuss, right? There's also the discussion with Ray Epps. There's also some immigration issues that I wanted to discuss regarding these buoys and whatnot, and the legality around them. So there's plenty to discuss. We're going to connect with our guest momentarily, Mark Brnovich, former Attorney General in Arizona. And before we do, I just want to give you the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDES. Now, with about a minute to go before we take the pause and get into the conversation on the guest, with the guest, excuse me, I want to play you this clip of audio, number 8, where Director Ray discusses Ray Epps. Listen to this.
So as a result of the actions of James Comey, the disgraced James Comey, and the FBI, they've interfered with the elections in both 2016 and 2020. Will that interference happen again in 2024 by the FBI?
The FBI is not going to be interfering in elections.
They did in 2016.
Well, I don't know that that's what Mr. Durham found. What I would tell you again is that there was conduct that I consider unacceptable and unrepresentative.
You can be in denial if you want to.
I'm not in denial,
Mr. Director,
sir.
you can be in denial on this. That's exactly what happened.
Okay, so there's a question of denial on whether there was interference by the FBI. There's a question of what's going on with Ray Epps. Who is Ray Epps, right? There's been all this discussion with Ray Epps. There's a lot to discuss, and we're going to get into that momentarily. I don't want you to go anywhere because Mark Brnovich is scheduled to be with us on the other side of this break. Again, the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833, the number 4, my last name, Valdez, and, of course, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Kick back, relax, enjoy the show. It's America at Night with me, Rich Valdez, and we're coming right back.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There have been, I think Tucker Carlson and some of the members' colleagues on the other side of the aisle have said that Ray Epps was a secret government agent in helping encourage this crime so as to make the president look bad. Do you have any knowledge of Ray Epps being a secret government agent?
No. I will say this notion that somehow the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources and agents is ludicrous and is a disservice to our brave, hardworking, dedicated men and women.
All right, so there you have Christopher Wray at the House Oversight hearing saying he doesn't know anything. Ray Epps is not a government agent. J6 wasn't orchestrated by the FBI, yada, yada, yada. We've heard him say a lot of things. And again, I specialize in talking smack about politicians on Capitol Hill, but somebody who specializes in taking people to court and being the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Arizona, former Attorney General Mark Brnovich is with us. General, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Rich, for having me on, and I apologize for the delay. I will be honest with you. It was the weirdest thing. I was trying to call in, and my phone died, and I tell people all the time, ever since I successfully sued Google and took on big tech, my electronic devices never work, especially when I'm talking to fellow conservatives.
You know, I would totally agree with you there. It happens to us quite often. Anytime I do a segment on China and I get a little rough around the edges with them, things just stop working, and people are like, "You went off the air in Michigan. You went off the air." I'm like, "Oh, geez." So it doesn't surprise me. Our friends in the deep state are always up to no good. But General, good to have you back. I appreciate it. I want to jump into a number of things. We have some time. We still have a couple of segments to go. So let's take our time and work through this. In what you've heard thus far of the testimony from Director Wray, do you think it's becoming of somebody who should be running the FBI?
No, but I think it's consistent with what a lot of people are concerned about, that the FBI has become more worried about parents at local school board meetings than they are about protecting America from the drug cartels. And quite frankly, as someone, I actually worked at the Department of Justice at one point in my career. I was very disappointed because there was times where there was just straight on questions that could be asked and answered that he refused to answer. And one of the things that I know that you have discussed, some of the questioning by Congressman Jordan related to the FBI infiltrating, religious organizations. But my goodness, I mean, the fact that they were dealing with banks and forcing banks to disclose information on people not under investigation, including 6 months' worth of firearms transaction, is really chilling. So we now have an FBI that's engaged in suppressing the First Amendment speech, colluding with big tech, and now we know that they want to violate people's Second Amendment rights as well.
This is a really big thing. And I'm glad you mentioned it the way you did, because you said it was chilling, and it is. But I think I never thought, honestly, and this is my own naivete, at 45 years old, I didn't think, I don't know, when I was 25, that I would ever live in an America where something like that would happen and it become public knowledge and people would not go bat crap crazy and like break things, right? But yet it seems like things like this happen quite often, and people are becoming kind of used to it.
That, Rich, is the part that was shocking to me. As I was watching the testimony today, I thought to myself, where's the left? Where's the ACLU? Where are all these people that are concerned about the overreach of law enforcement? They're concerned about, no-knock warrants and, stop and frisk that's deterring crime in New York. Where are all those people? Because they're willing to undermine street-level law enforcement, and yet they're willing to allow a federal agency with more power than anyone else in this country to essentially become a Praetorian Guard. And one of the things that, when Rome, during the fall of Rome, you had this Praetorian Guard that looked at themselves. They were part of the Legion, and they looked at themselves as the keeper of all things good and all things Roman, and they became very corrupt and very, very powerful. And I worry now, as someone especially that's family, as you know, Rich, I'm a first-generation American. My family fled communism. And when I see this centralization of authority and this unchecked authority where you have a law enforcement agency basically dictating to the private sector what they should do, which is really insidious and dangerous, but also this ability to spy on people that are running for president or the president of the United States, but then you combine that with the notion that they're unwilling to answer questions to Congress, which has this oversight authority. I mean, this is dangerous. I just keep thinking, where's the ACLU? Where's all my friends on the left saying, wait a minute, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we are seeing this concentration now. And they may like it now because they're going after Republicans, but one day that will eventually be turned against all Americans, whether they're Democrats or Republicans.
This is the part where I feel like, the people that I cross paths with, and I say things like what you're saying, and then they turn to me and go, "Oh, come on, you're going too far." Just because they're trying to find out who's got a gun and what kind of guns they're buying and whatnot, it doesn't mean that they're going to go and try and take your gun. And I'm thinking, what else could it possibly mean? Like, why on earth would you want to know if I just have a gun, right? I mean, already there's FBI checks for that stuff. So clearly, it's beyond this, and there's some sort of marriage between the financial and the other. And we've seen in the past certain banks saying that they didn't want to accept purchases or do any business with gun manufacturers. So I mean, it's a very interesting. I mean, to me, it goes beyond woke. It's exactly what you're talking about, exactly what your parents fled. These communist ideas that to me were once considered Red Scare, and now it's more like, real life scare. Am I making too much of this, or are you in the same world here?
No, this is, and really, I don't want to sound like, I try to be very logical on this, and I don't want to sound like I'm being paranoid, but what we're seeing is systematically in America, and this is a lot of things I used to talk about when I was AG. So you look at the 1619 project that's trying to undermine American values and undermine the very basis, the rule of law, for which this country is founded, and, start this grievance culture. And then now you look at what's going on with the ESG movement, which I took on when I was AG, which is all about basically, forcing corporate America to go along with this neo-Marxist ideology. And now, and this is the real danger, is that when you have these government agencies, these government bureaucracies that are unaccountable, that are unchecked, that think they don't even have to answer members of Congress's questions, this is when it becomes very, very dangerous. And that's why, for example, even during today's testimony, when you had the FBI director kind of deflecting and not even discussing what they did with big tech and corporate America suppressing information, violating the First Amendment. I mean, come on, let's all be real. When you have an agency of the power of like the Department of Justice that can literally take away your life, liberty, property, of course you're going to get corporate America complying. And to me, that is much more dangerous in a lot of ways than what we saw in the former Soviet Union. Because I will tell you what, as someone whose family lived through communism, when the government used to say and do things, people didn't like it, but they knew that the government was full of crap. But now when you have the patina of the private sector or private companies saying, oh, this is this or that's that, when they're being forced to do so by the government, in many ways that is much, much more dangerous. And so clearly the current Department of Justice looks at themselves as some sort of Praetorian Guard where they're going to make the rules. They're going to, pick and choose who's going to be prosecuted, who's not going to be prosecuted, what's going to become a priority. It's dangerous on so many levels, especially to the very, very, very idea about American exceptionalism and the rule of law. And so one of the things that I consistently talk about that I don't think enough conservatives talk about is we need to get rid of merit protection or civil service protection for this government bureaucrats. There is a permanent bureaucratic class in the State Department, in the Department of Defense, and yes, at the Department of Justice that can't be fired, can't be removed, and what they are doing is perpetuating a hard left ideology.
Yeah, and I think that's really well put. Folks, we're on with former Arizona State Attorney General Mark Brnovich. And straight ahead, we're going to continue our conversation. I want to get your reaction to a lawsuit, or a letter, rather, that was sent to Target from 7 of your former colleagues, state attorneys general, that are saying that some of their Pride merchandise might violate certain child protection laws in their states. I thought that was an interesting angle and one I'd like to learn more about. So, folks, stick around. We're coming back with Mark Brnovich. Our phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez is me. Mark Brnovich is our guest, and we're discussing this letter that was sent by 7 Republican attorneys general to the Target Corporation, to their CEO, Brian Cornell, voicing their concern, right? And the concern is that the company's Pride collection was potentially harmful to minors and economically detrimental to the group's respective states, or at least their states' interests as Target shareholders due to subsequent boycotts, according to a report on Thursday from Fox News. And it goes on, and there's a few quotes from the article. But Mark Brnovich, I'm curious to know, this is an angle I don't think I've seen in the past of saying your merchandise is harmful. How do you weigh in on this?
Well, I think today's kids face enough indoctrination at their public schools, so they surely don't need to be getting it at their local Target. And I don't think this is unprecedented. Let's put this in context, Rich. Sure. For example, I sued Google successfully because they were marketing vaping products to kids. And, we wanted to make sure that wasn't happening. Yeah. You remember maybe the lawsuits against Big Tobacco with Joe Camel where they were marketing things towards kids. Historically, we recognize whether it's issues like state lotteries and gambling or, tobacco, that kids, especially people that are under 18, are vulnerable, they're impressionable, and we as a society have an obligation to protect them. And so I look at this letter as basically an attempt by the chief legal officers of their states who are charged with enforcing, child protection laws and protecting the most vulnerable in their society, basically telling Target that, hey, you have to watch what you're doing. And one of the other things in that letter that I thought was really important is they called out Target for being so woke, and especially the millions of dollars that are going to Glisten, an organization that basically pays or gives financial resources for activists to undermine parental rights and parental notification. So, they were basically sending a shot across Target's bow saying, look, we need to protect our kids, and we don't need the nanny state. I think everyone recognizes that. But when you're doing something that targets kids, that's when the state has a role to come in and say, no, wait a minute, whether it's tobacco, whether it's gambling, whether it's, trying to alienate parents' rights, the state has an obligation to step in and say, as a corporation, you shouldn't be doing that. And especially, I know that this is all about being woke. This is all about woke culture running, amok. And the far left is so bad that you now have boardrooms in corporate America that are filled with people that are more afraid of the cancel culture than they are serving their consumers.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they did it, because I think so often we find ourselves stuck. And I say we, I'm talking about parents, regular people, right? People that are not in public life, that wake up and they're like, hey, I'm at Target today, and there is a tuck-friendly one-piece bathing suit in the girls section. Obviously, it's designed for girls with a penis. And how do I have this conversation? And should I be having this conversation? And did I want to have this conversation with my, 5, 10, or 12-year-old that's in tow when I'm at Target? And I think, and not just those uncomfortable moments, but moreover, everything overall, the entire just idea that we're not it anymore, right? Parents aren't the ones that are deciding how they're going to have a conversation on any number of things. That society's now having that conversation for them. And it makes us feel like, well, we're wrong if we come out against this and say, I don't think this is the right thing. I don't want you to, I don't advise that you do this. Your kid may turn to you and say, well, my teacher says if you say that, then you're a bigot. And it's just bizarre to me how far we've come, or how far away we've gone from what was once considered normal. And
the key to this, and not to keep harping on this, but you go back to the Communist Manifesto and you look at the things that Marx wrote about. It wasn't just about eliminating private property and progressive income taxes. One of the big issues that he talked about is eliminating the family, eliminating religion. And so all of this that's going on right now is just really classic Marxism, or I would call it neo-Marxism. And we are seeing this embodied not only with Target and a lot of these corporations, it's because companies now are so worried about their ESG score, where they're rewarded or punished based on their commitment to causes favored by elites. And so, the ESG movement's all about the environmental social governance movement. And basically, globalists are now using that to pressure American companies into adopting far left progressive practices, which essentially have their roots in the Communist Manifesto.
Really well put. General, I know you're scheduled to be with us till now, but if you can hang on just a minute or two more, I want to get a quick take from you on this buoy situation to help stem illegal immigration in Texas. So, folks, we're coming right back. Attorney Mark Brnovich, don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Our guest, former Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich. And General, the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, he's facing a lawsuit over the use of buoys in the Rio Grande River to help mitigate border crossings that are not legal. And I'm just wondering what your take is on that. Does he have the authority to put the buoys in? Does he not? What are the outcomes here?
The short answer is yes. We actually, when I was Attorney General, we issued an opinion that a state has a constitutional ability to defend its borders when invaded by non-state hostile actors, such as the armed cartels and the drug gangs that have essentially seized control of our border. So I would urge people to go pick up their Constitution and look at the state self-defense clause in Article 1, Section 10, or the invasion clause in Article 4, Section 4. So the state definitely has the ability to do that. And then the question becomes, well, should they be doing it, and why are they doing it? And the bottom line is that America is not only being overrun by the leftists in the Biden administration, but it has become overrun by the cartels who are being supplied precursor chemicals by communist China. And every day in this country, Rich, every 5 minutes on average, someone is dying of a drug overdose. We are losing an entire generation of people, and not only human lives, but in fiscal treasure as well. So beyond the legal analysis, we all know at some personal level, at our very cores, that is what is happening at our southern border is immoral, unlawful, and it does constitute an invasion. And that's why I'm glad Governor Abbott did something.
Yeah, me too. All right, so let's let everybody know, Mark Brnovich, how they can follow you, keep up to speed with everything that you're working on. Let them know.
I'm at General Brnovich on Twitter, and so, I've been fighting the good fight, and I'm going to continue to do so because we got to do everything we can, every day we can, to protect our individual liberties and push back against the neo-Marxist agenda that's, quite frankly, assaulting us on many fronts right now.
Outstanding. Well done. Always appreciate the conversation. We have to do it again soon. Folks, Mark Brnovich, former Arizona Attorney General, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Rich.
Bet. Yes, sir. All right, folks, there is more to come straight ahead, including some of your calls. I know there's a few folks on hold. We just ran out of time, but we will get to you. Plus, we're going to have a conversation on, let's see, where did that go? Oh, yes. We've got drugs that are going to be costing more money because of Bernie Sanders. You don't want to miss this. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, Here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you, straight till 1 a.m. Eastern Time. And our phone number, if you want to join this late-night national town hall conversation, feel free, pull up a chair, kick up your feet, relax, and join us. 833-482-5337 is the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ. And last hour, we talked about some of the FBI lies. Christopher Wray's getting grilled on Capitol Hill for all of the mistruths and half-truths that he's been telling. Biden's made some flops in his speech in Lithuania. And there's other things going on Capitol Hill in the last week or so that we haven't really talked about. And one of them is what's going on with the healthcare agenda. Right now, there's always a back and forth. Obviously, the special interests are always doing what they do. However, it's interesting to note that while we have so many different doctors that join us on this program and people talk about all these different health issues, ailments, and remedies, one of the things that I think we're not talking about is how the cost of drugs is prohibitive. Now, listen, I think everybody has to make their money back from their research, development, et cetera, et cetera. But when you have certain special interests making it a point to make healthcare unaffordable, then I think it's something we should look at. And if that's not the case, then let it not be the case. But we want to make sure that it isn't, right? We want to make sure that things are as affordable as they can be and that we're as transparent as we could be. And somebody that's on the forefront of that has her finger on the pulse is Anne-Marie Buerkle. Not only is she a former United States Congresswoman and former chairwoman of the Consumer Product Safety Commission at the federal level, but she's also our guest tonight and a former nurse. Anne-Marie Buerkle, welcome.
Thank you, Rich, very much. It's so nice to be here.
Likewise. Thank you for joining us. And I was perusing your op-ed recently in the Tennessee Star on this topic, and I figured, let's talk about it because I think this is something that our audience could really benefit from hearing. Because again, healthcare is something that affects everybody, right? Whether you're young or old or in between, married, single, it doesn't matter. Everybody's dealing with healthcare at some level in some capacity, one way or another.
Absolutely. And not only is everyone dealing with healthcare on some level, but they're also dealing with inflation at the same time. And so some unfortunate people have had to make choices between can I afford this drug, or can I seek this care, or should I put food on the table for my kids? And so the American people, and in recent surveys showed 90% of the American people, 90%, which is quite a number, if really are looking for someone to lower their health care costs and their drug costs, and they would support a person or a party that would do that. And so I look at the Republican Party, and the last time they took a adamant stand on health care was back in 2010 in the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And at that time, they won 65 seats in the House, and they took back the majority after many years. And so I look at the Republican Party today, and it concerns me because they are not going on the offense with this issue. And it's something, as I say, most Americans are concerned about. 39% said they would cross party lines to vote for someone who would help to lower health care costs. So it's on their minds, and the Republicans have a great opportunity, and so far they haven't taken advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, well, that's lamentable, but let's get to the meat and potatoes of it, because it seems that there's a little bit of a tug of war going on in the Senate. Both Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders are involved. Give us the lay of the land.
So, as your listeners know, the Democrats control the Senate. Therefore, the Democrats are chairman of the committee. And currently, Bernie Sanders, the self-avowed socialist from Vermont, runs and is in charge of, he's chairman of the Health Committee in the Senate. So he is the one that brings up legislation in that committee, and then Chuck Schumer brings it to the Senate floor for a vote by all the senators. So you just have to peruse any piece of Bernie Sanders legislation or just listen to him. He has in mind that we get to a single-payer system. He's been upfront about that. But currently, he knows he can't just do it in one fell swoop. He has to do it incrementally and gradually. And so that is what we're seeing right now in the Health Committee in the Senate. He's got several pieces of legislation, and eventually Senator Schumer will conglomerate those into one bill, one health care bill, and then they'll bring it to the Senate floor for a vote. And we can talk about what are in those various bills and the concerns I have with regards to what they're going to do to the cost of drugs and the cost of health care.
All right, and we'll do that straight ahead. I just want to remind everybody who we're on with Anne-Marie Buerkle, former nurse, former congresswoman, and former chairwoman of the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. And we're discussing a bill that would raise the cost of certain drugs that I think the timing on this is really bad. I don't think we should ever raise the cost of drugs by legislation, or even if it's a byproduct of legislation. That shouldn't be the case. Anytime the government's involved in making me spend more money, it's a bad thing. So we're going to continue that conversation and find out what drugs are impacting or going to be impacted here, as well as the nuts and bolts of the bill with Anne-Marie Buerkle. And that's coming up. Plus your calls, 833-482-5337, 8334-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
You're diagnosed with a cancer and you expect your insurance company to pay for it. But they dig into your medical records, discover you had asthma as a kid, claim you had a heart attack as a pre-existing condition, and they refuse to pay. Folks, that's not health insurance. That's a scam. That's a scam. It has to end.
All right, that's President Biden recently talking about a scam that needs to end. But the reality is this is a bill that he'll likely sign, right? And the whole thing seems like a gift to Big Pharma. Now, Big Pharma, I'm in the New York area, and if you guys remember the show The Sopranos, our producer was just pointing this out. Big Pharma sounds like a gangster from The Sopranos, right? That's Tony, that's Big Pharma. And in real life, Big Pharma is like a gangster. And this is what we're seeing happen here, where people are imposing price controls, out-of-pocket caps that sound good, but are more like a poison pill. I want to bring our guest back in to weigh in on this stuff because she knows what she's talking about. Former nurse, former congresswoman, and former chair of the United States Product Safety Commission, Anne-Marie Buerkle. Welcome back.
Thanks so much, Rich. And again, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, likewise. It's a pleasure to speak with you. So we're continuing our conversation on what gets impacted here on this bill. And I think a lot of people hear, price caps, and they think this is a good thing, not realizing that it could affect things in other places. What's your thought on that?
So, yes, you're absolutely right. In one of the pieces of legislation that Bernie Sanders wants to bring to the Senate floor, it's an out-of-pocket insulin price cap. Now, that sounds good. It makes you think that, oh, good, we're going to pay less for the insulin. Now, what that really means is when you go to your pharmacist and you pick up your insulin, they can only charge you a certain amount of money. They're talking about $35. But in reality, there's nothing in that legislation that prevents pharma on the other end from raising the price of insulin as high as they want it. There's nothing that limits it there. And so what happens is a healthcare plan has to pay for that increased cost of insulin. And so your healthcare premium goes up and it gets taken out of your paycheck. And so, yes, you may be paying less at the pharmacy, but you're paying more out of your paycheck for your healthcare coverage. So it does nothing to reduce the cost of healthcare and the cost of insulin. It really just is a red herring. And the problem with that, Rich, is that once you include one or two drugs, you can imagine what's going to happen with everyone wanting their drug to have an out-of-pocket price cap.
Right. Who wouldn't? Right. It makes sense for everybody. Hey, cap mine. I'm going to double the price.
And so you can imagine this Palapalooza down in Washington and the lobbyists just going after trying to get their drug on that out-of-pocket cap list. The Republicans have to get serious about having free market solutions. And so in that case, and Senator Lee has introduced legislation, biosimilars are a terrific alternative to name brand drugs. A drug that is, the composition is the same and it has the same effect, but it's not the brand name that is generally so very expensive, like a generic, but they're biosimilars. And so Senator Lee has introduced legislation that would reduce the red tape that would allow the FDA to approve more biosimilar drugs. That's how you get to the root of the problem. It isn't just by this smoke and mirrors and this phony price cap, when on the other end, pharma can continue to raise the price of insulin. And so competition in the marketplace, other biosimilars that are effective, that's what's going to keep pharma from raising those insulin prices, because they're going to have competition. So you've got senators who are paying attention. Senator Lee has taken a lead with this FDA and reforming the ability to approve these biosimilar drugs. Senator Rand Paul, again, a name very familiar to your listeners, a physician who was on the forefront of all the COVID nonsense and who really understood what was happening. He now has stood up another piece of legislation they're trying to get through is an anti-PBM. They're calling it a PBM reform. And for your listeners, because many people haven't heard about a PBM or a pharmacy benefit manager. And so what happens is this entity negotiates the price of the drugs for your healthcare plan with pharma. So pharma hates PBMs. And so they're pushing hard, and they're pushing Bernie Sanders hard to introduce legislation that will weaken their ability to negotiate the cost of drugs with big pharma for healthcare plans. And roughly, a PBM saves $1,000 per person annually when it comes to drug costs. That's significant. And so eliminating the PBMs is really a gift to big pharma. Now, we've got Rand Paul, who understands that, and he's taken a stand. He is not anti-PBM, but Senator Sanders is trying to get this PBM Reform Act passed, and that would significantly alter the ability of the PBM to negotiate a lower drug price. So, for all your listeners, if you want to get involved, you want to take a stand on this, you can call your senator's office and tell him no, vote no on that PBM Reform Act. It is not going to reduce the cost of drugs. It's going to increase the cost of drug prices.
Yeah, and this is interesting. And one of the things you point out in your piece, and I think is worthy of note, is that the Affordable Care Act didn't make health care or health insurance more affordable. And similarly, this, which aims to make it look like drugs will become more affordable, it won't. It'll just, like you said, it'll create a free-for-all with everybody looking to raise the cost of their drugs because they can now have a cap put in place, which would create a lot of problems. And I just know this from my own medication and whatever. There was a medication that the doctor gave me, and I took it for like a month, and then my insurance said, no, we're not covering that anymore. You can take another one, but it can't be that one. And I just thought, how interesting. And the out-of-pocket cost to me was $400 or $500, something like that. And I was like, I don't have to take this for that long, so I'm not going to do it. I'll go with the other one. And I went with the other one, which, after a couple of days they approved, but included within my plan. And I'm just thinking, that's just me and taking something on a short term. Just imagine people who take drugs for chronic illness. This could be life-changing for them.
Absolutely. And you're talking about a very complex system. You've got, there's rules and regulations so complex. But you said it at the beginning of the show, and that is when the government steps in and gets involved, it increases the cost and it decreases the effectiveness of whatever the program is or whatever you're regulating. That's just how it works. And unfortunately, that's what will happen if either one of these pieces of legislation get passed, because this is putting the government in the equation once again, just like with the Affordable Care Act, and it takes the patient out of the center of the discussion, and that should never be. And that's why I get frustrated with the Republican Party and with the leaders, because there's things you can do. You can modernize the FDA, push these biosimilars and competition in the marketplace. One of the things they could do and do it. Everyone can relate to this. The hospital that I trained in as a nurse used to be St. Joseph's Hospital, 400 beds, accountable to the community. Well, over the years, it's gotten gobbled up by a large healthcare system. They're now based in Michigan, and there's 88 hospitals in the system. And so these mergers of the hospitals is another reason why we're seeing drug prices, or not drug prices, but healthcare costs in general and drug prices driven up. Because what hospitals are doing now is, if I go into the hospital and I have a procedure done, they should bill the insurance company at the hospital rate. If I go see my physician, they should bill my healthcare insurance with the physician rate and the physician code. Well, the hospitals now, because now the doctors work for the hospital, everything gets, and what they're doing is they're billing and submitting charges as if you were seen in the hospital as opposed to being seen by a doctor. That is driving up the cost of healthcare beyond words. And
right, because all the hospitals have purchased all of the local practices.
Exactly.
And now the doctors all work for the hospital. Wow.
Exactly right. And so it's referred to as dishonest billing. You've got some people on the House, Congressman Hearn, in the Senate, Senator Braun, who want to go after this dishonest billing practice and hold these healthcare systems accountable.
Anne-Marie Buerkle, we'll leave it there. We could do this all night. Former Congresswoman and Chair of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it. Got to have you back to do this again.
I would love to come back, and thanks so much again. Have a great evening.
You too. God bless. All right, folks, we're coming right back. We're going to discuss human trafficking and the media smears on anybody who wants to talk about it. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez. Our phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. At the top of the next hour, Open Phone America, where you get to call in on any topic you'd like. And, of course, before the end of the program, we'll be taking your calls on this topic. And there's a piece I'm looking at on Breitbart.com. Most major film critics are boycotting a new film that's out called The Sound of Freedom, despite the massive box office success. I think they just hit $40 million this weekend. No reviews from the New York Times or the LA Times. And, of course, this doesn't come as a surprise to me. It's one of those things. It's disappointing, but not a surprise. And in addition to not reviewing the film, you've got a lot in the media that are now taking shots at the film, saying that it's driven by bigotry and fear. And I think on Monday night, the leading story was that anything related to this film, any coverage that it got from the mainstream, was saying that it was QAnon conspiracies come to life on the silver screen. It's really been terrible. And I think what's really terrible about all of this is the film, the central focus of it is to show how underrepresented this topic is in the media, and how under-addressed it is in law enforcement today. It's a huge problem that deserves a lot more attention. And of course, we're talking about the trafficking of human beings for sex slavery and the like. And it's just horrible. And somebody who's familiar with this topic is Jaco Booyens. He's founder and CEO of After Eden Pictures and the head of Jaco Booyens Ministry. And he's an anti-sex trafficking advocate. Jaco, welcome.
Thank you for putting voice to this very important matter. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. I'm happy to do it. Now, let's talk about this because, again, like I said, I know you have some extensive understanding of this. And I'm curious to know your reaction and if you've gone through similar when discussing this, trying to shed light on this. Do you find the media trying to just kind of ignore you as well, or even worse, ridicule you or anyone else that's talking about this?
Yeah, look, Tim Ballard is a close friend, and when they had the first script, which is more than almost 5 years ago, which is before QAnon even became a thing, so it's preposterous to even drag QAnon into this. And there's a reason. I'll talk about the reason that they're particularly targeting men. Because historically, Rich, we have not had men in this fight. It's particularly a fight fought by women. This fight, for me, started 28 years ago. I've been an anti-child sex trafficking advocate and abolitionist, and by God's grace became a subject matter expert over a 28-year period, because when I was 18 in 1994 as a senior in high school, my sister was trafficked when she was 12. We had no father in the house. And it took us 6 years to find her. And by God's grace, we found her. We found her. And so we learned firsthand 28 years ago. And ever since, we've been fighting this fight. And so we're very closely connected with the industry, those who fight. And we have never had mainstream media support, ever. You know, in 2007, I went to the CNN building in Atlanta, Georgia. I was a key subject matter advisor on Jeffrey Epstein in 2007, and I went to Wolf Blitzer at CNN, and I said, here's the facts. You be the champion. You be the hero. Let CNN be the hero. And that's the old CNN, and they dismissed it. They wouldn't touch it. So I wasn't surprised.
Back in 2007.
Yeah.
Wow.
They've never, Rich. And I told Tim, they're going to come for you. But people need to watch this film because it is literally, proverbially, the scales are falling off of the eyes of Americans. Now, something the film doesn't do and can't do, because it's not what they do. They just do rescues. It doesn't give the call to action for now. How do we fight this in our local communities? And we have those answers for the American public. But first, we needed them to be aware. They need to be aware that law enforcement is not enforcing the law. Little things like this, Rich. Up until 2015, there were no child sex trafficking laws in America. Zero.
Wow.
We all went to war, and we won the battle, and we saw President Trump do incredible work on that matter. And now there's trafficking laws on the books. But now you'll find that the district attorneys are prosecuting child sex crimes, not as child sex crimes. When we had 3 rescues last week in Dallas, Texas. Minors, 3. Last week, American children trafficked, right? You cannot get the Dallas County judge or district attorney to take that case for what it is. They plead them down to a drug charge, a kidnapping charge even, or some arms charge, but they will not let these cases go into a court of law where the jury can throw the book at them, because every time it goes to the court of law, the perpetrator gets 30 and 40 years. So law
are they doing this because they don't have state statutes on sex trafficking the way we have them at the federal level, or is it because
No. Our
some
state
other reason?
statutes across the country, all 50 states have incredible laws, but it's all you got to connect it with the movement at the time. So the same people that's fighting Sound of Freedom now, that's saying, "Oh, this is a action flick for white guys with a worm brain," like they want to ostracize the man because they don't want men to rise up and fight for children. For the same reason they told men, "You have no voice in the abortion conversation."
Right.
For the same reason they don't, because they want to fight women. They're cowards. And so the men are rising up. The wives are taking their husbands to this movie. They are caring about their daughters. But it's a very complicated scenario here because we're the number one nation on earth, the U.S., buying sex with children. We are. So now it gets tricky because if we say, okay, the cartel is flooding kids across the border, which is what Sound of Freedom, that child in the movie was on the way to America, right? That child was being sold into America, which is a true story. Who's buying the children? It's American men that's buying. So now we got to address demand. It's a demand-driven business. Supply meets demand. Well, what fuels demand? The entry-level drug to demand is pornography. We also happen to be the number one producer and consumer of pornography. So we got a societal problem here, Rich.
Yeah,
a real problem.
Big time.
And it's a morality issue because ultimately it's a purpose issue. It's an identity issue. Okay, so if it's an identity issue, where have we heard that? They, the left, want to give children the choice of identity or superimpose a sexualized identity on them in the classroom. Don't tell your parents. Well, if we're going to do that, then we have to absolutely debilitate women. So let's do this. Let's question the womb. What is a woman? It's all connected. This is all connected. Very strategic to do what? Destabilize the nuclear family, call the white guy a supremacist, a neo-Nazi, silence him, ostracize him. He now gets stuck in pornography because intimacy is now relegated. It is a black hole that our culture is in at the moment. And if we don't have the right conversation at this time, we can say sex trafficking is horrible. Great. But now what?
Yeah, next.
What does Joe next door do for his family to make sure his daughter is not talking to a predator on Instagram? Because the government is covering Instagram with Section 230. They're covering the 72 million child porn images that's currently on Facebook that they refuse to remove because they've got coverage under Section 230. This is a very, very big conversation where society has to say, wait a minute. And for that matter, I'm thankful for Sound of Freedom, very thankful. Because
let me remind everybody what we're doing here. So we're talking about the film The Sound of Freedom with Jaco Booyens. He's founder and CEO of After Eden Pictures, and he's in charge of Jaco Booyens Ministries, an anti-sex trafficking advocate. And I want to continue the conversation with exactly where we're leaving off, which is what can people do to fight back against this stuff? How do we take action? And we're going to do that with Jaco straight ahead. Plus your calls, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, so The Sound of Freedom, the film that came out on the 4th of July and just this last weekend had a $40 million weekend at the box office. It's a genuine box office phenomenon, and the corporate media seem to be very bothered by this. You've got the Washington Post, the Guardian, and other of the big-name usual suspects out there, being critical, not making any mention of the film, that it's really, really good and that people are out there watching it. And of course, how could they ever bring any attention to say, oh, this is really great that, they're having such success? They can't, because then it would give credence to the idea that what they're calling a crazy QAnon conspiracy film is actually succeeding. And I don't think they ever want to do that. Our guest, Jaco Booyens, he's a anti-sex slavery trafficking advocate and founder and CEO of After Eden Pictures, also the head of Jaco Booyens Ministries. And we were discussing how men are ostracized from the conversation and how people can take action. We just don't know what to do. Jaco Booyens, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Rich. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. And what is your recommendation, being that you're on the front lines of this for the last, almost 3 decades? What is your recommendation to everybody out there that's listening to actually take action to fight back? I mean, yeah, we can go to a movie and learn about it, but what else can people do?
Yeah, and that's what needs to happen. Look, knowledge is power. And knowing that it happens is step one, but now we need to take action. So, and this is a shameless plug. If people go to our website, helpjbm.org, we have over 1,200 pieces of resource for families. Resource such as, how do I talk to my son about trafficking? How do I find out if he's stuck in pornography? If he is, how do I get him out of it? How do I get my husband out of pornography? How do I have this conversation with my teenagers to say, this is the wolf out there. There is a wolf out there that's prowling, looking for you, intentionally profiling. It's a crime of the exploitation of vulnerabilities, right? So the predators are looking for a child that's vulnerable. Well, Maslow's hierarchy of needs tell you that the baseline of vulnerability is food and shelter. Then it's love and belonging. Then it's, and up the ladder you go. So it's just a predator on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, looking for a vulnerable child and then exploiting the vulnerability. And so when we educate our teens where they may be vulnerable and we fortify their vulnerabilities, they are now less susceptible for falling into trafficking. The predator passed them by because they're cowards. They're looking for a soft target. We can actually end this, Rich. If we're proactive and we're training families, pastors, youth pastors, school principals, and say, this is the conversation, here's the tools and the mechanisms. Ask your teenager if they've ever had these 10 questions asked of them on social media in a DM. If the answer is yes, that was a predator. Ask your teenagers if they're using these emojis, or if someone that's talking to them ends their conversation with one of these emojis. Because if it is, it's a predator tagging your child to send a signal to another predator that she's a soft target. It's a language. This is factual. It's real. We're in this we train the FBI. There's things we can do. Then, as constituents, we can do things to put pressure on our politicians because there's things they can do. We've tracked 140 child sex crime bills in this last session that were not passed to protect children against this very issue. Those politicians in those states should be exposed. There should be voting records should be exposed. It should be shown, and we list those bills. Hey, Illinois, these guys killed this bill, and this bill was to protect your children from pedophilia and sexual exploitation in the classroom. Lowering penalties against sex traffickers, or canceling your state's sex offender registry, California, or New York, letting pedophiles out on the street without bail. The people don't know there's physical things they can do to safeguard their communities and put pressure on their elected officials. An extreme amount of pressure right now, Rich, needs to be placed on Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell right now. Mm-hmm. Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell have a responsibility right now with this awareness to go with the Senate and Congress and say we must repeal and reform Section 230. We have to remove, because Instagram right now is the number one platform where trafficking transactions are happening, where children are being lured by pedophiles. Instagram. But they're flying under protection. That protection, we saw in the election. We understand now that These social platforms are publishers. They do give commentary. They do poll. They do push votes in a certain direction. They do curate content. They're like a news organization. They should not have the protection they have under Section 230. If we just do that alone, and class action suits start mounting up against these guys when there's child porn on their sites, by default, we're cutting off a funnel, an access highway between the buyer of sex with a child and the actual victim. We're cutting off that funnel. It's like choking them, right?
Right.
We must do all of it, including securing the border, because children are flooding. We 11 trips to the border in the last 5 months, been shot at by the cartel, wearing the bulletproof vest deep into Mexico, in the brothel districts looking for children. That's what we've been doing. And let me tell you, it is out of control. Secretary Mayorkas, and this is something that Sound of Freedom is speaking into. Hey, children are coming into this country. This is why, could you imagine if Karine Jean-Pierre tomorrow stood in as a press secretary of the United States and she said, you know what, President Joe Biden had an epiphany. Give him the benefit of the doubt last night. And he realized that children are being sold for sex across our border. If she said those sentences, the American public would demand the border to be shut down tomorrow.
Yeah.
But that is happening.
I think you're right. Jaco, hang on for a second. We're going to take a quick pause here. Folks, we're on with Jaco Booyens, head of Jaco Booyens Ministry. And I think what he's talking about right now is so incredibly important. He's the founder of After Eden Pictures, and he's an anti-sex trafficking advocate. Don't move a muscle. You don't want to miss this.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We're going to wrap up with Jaco Booyens. We're discussing his reaction to the media's blackout of the Sound of Freedom film and what people can do to hold their elected officials accountable to make sure that we take action on this issue. Jaco Booyens, in the time we have left, let everybody know, your final thoughts and, of course, how they can follow you and support the work you're doing.
Thank you, Rich, again, for putting voice to this. It's literally going to save lives. Now, I want the American people to be educated, really educate yourself. Now that you're enlightened, now go deep. And it's about fortifying your family, making sure that your children, make it personal. This has to become personal and local. Start local. Talk to the buddies at the golf course. Talk to your family members. Speak to your children. Educate them. Go to our website, helpjbm.org, and follow us on Instagram, yaku.booyens.
Outstanding. Thank you, Jaco. God bless you. Godspeed in everything you're doing. Hope to have you back soon.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, folks, Open Phone America's coming right up. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. Your calls and more straight ahead. Don't miss it. We're coming right back. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S on all of these social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. It's the Wednesday night edition, and I'm happy to be here with you. Join us by phone. It's Open Phone America. a long-lived tradition here on this program. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. And a bunch of things we're going to get into. We've discussed a number of things tonight. We've had some extensive discussion on Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, being grilled by members of Congress earlier today. And I'll play some of the additional clips of audio that we didn't get to earlier. And I might even replay some of the ones we did play because some of them were really good, like the exchange with Jim Jordan. Outstanding. I think it's worth listening to every minute. I think it's 2 minutes long. Definitely worth listening to because it's a brilliant point that he makes, how they targeted Catholics. Then there's a bunch of other things that I wanted to get to, but we talked about how big pharma is influencing Bernie Sanders and Republicans to push this price cap on out-of-pocket expense at the pharmacy, but doing nothing to control the cost of the overall price of the drug. And this is, it's a political sleight of hand, and that's something that's going on in Washington. And, of course, we talked about the film The Sound of Freedom, but the larger picture being the human trafficking for the sex slave trade. And this is an issue that we speak about often here. And honestly, the only reason I speak about it often here is because I've had the privilege of interviewing people that have survived coming out of that industry, out of that slave trade. And it is heartbreaking to me. It really is heartbreaking to me. So we'll continue those discussions, plus your calls and opinions on all of the topics that we're discussing, plus the ones you want to bring to the table. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. But before we get to your calls, and I know you're calling in and we're going to get you lined up and ready to go, I want to get to something. And part of what I want to discuss before we hit the open phones is this interaction between Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for president, and a heckler, right? Somebody starts heckling him, and he handles it extremely well. And she eventually lets her guard down. Listen to this.
The number of rapes that are actually reported in the U.S.
Republicans are raping people! President Trump is a rapist!
Let her speak. We'll give her. Let me get. You want to finish what you have to say?
The back and forth. But he's talking about the number of rapes that are occurring, and this person's yelling, saying, "You don't know about this, and you don't know about that," and he's attempting to calm her down. Go ahead, let it play.
You can say something to me. It's okay. Come back. Come on back. It's okay. This is like you answer. Come on up. It's okay. You can ask me a question, and then I will answer. Do you want to ask me a question? You can do that.
If somebody non-consensually rapes me, I'm not having their child. This is my choice, it's my body. I'm already raising a kid that somebody implanted in me and doesn't take care of. The system does nothing for the single mother. There's no child support and nobody goes after them. I've been raising a child by myself for 8 years. My name is Kayla Crest.
And are you a mother?
I am a mother.
Okay, thank you.
And my kid is successful, and I don't want to be frowned upon. I don't want to be put down because I'm a single mother. My kid is healthy, happy, and successful.
Thank you, Kayla. And I want to say you're doing one of the most important things is a mother raising 4 children in this world. Even if we have our disagreements, I want to say thank you for that. So thank you. And part of what it means to live in this country is we have free speech. We get to speak our minds openly, even if we all don't agree on it. So let's actually applaud her for the courage. Come into a room and ask me a question, even though we don't agree on it.
So again, this is Vivek Ramaswamy, again, a couple of days ago in a campaign event. And he praises this protester who interrupts his campaign event. And again, I think this is mark of a skilled communicator, right? That's how you talk to people. That's how you deal with people. You don't just eject them. You don't just fight them, but you listen to people and you give them a chance. That's what I try to do. And listen, doesn't mean I'll do it 100% of the time. There will be times, or if I have the ability, I'll say, you know what, get them out. And then there will be times where I go, I'm not even having this conversation. But I think in a situation like that, where this woman is clearly distraught, and she goes from yelling to crying, and saying that, what about people that are raped and being forced to have these children because you're pro-life, and then going from that third person to then going to the first person where she says, I was implanted with a child, and again, and not being angry with the child, but being angry at the situation, at the harm that was done to her. And I think he handled it well in every sense. But it was so important to me that we have these conversations, right? That we actually have those discussions, that we don't just ostracize people. And it's critical that we have that talk on every topic, right? And that's part of the reason why I love my job. And I love connecting with you guys across the country. We've got callers from all over. Some of you like me. Some of you can't stand me. But I'm willing to speak with you. And it's because I think we have to have that conversation. We need to have this dialogue. We have to connect, because it really doesn't help if we don't, right? But Kayla Christ, she's from Stanwood, Iowa, she interrupted Ramaswamy's remarks by shouting, "Protect our women. Republicans are raping people," and, just being angry. And he talked her down. And he said he wanted to give her a chance. And they had this conversation. And I just think it's really what the American system is about, right? It really is. And I think that's the beauty of our dialogue, the beauty of how we came about as a nation, where we had disputes amongst ourselves. The Constitutional Convention, these were disputes, Jefferson, Madison, that people were not on the same page, but we got on the same page, and we found which pages we were on mutually. And you find that common ground, and you get it done. And so kudos to Vivek Ramaswamy for doing that and having that and setting forth that example, because I think that's incredibly important, necessary, required in order for us to move forward as a nation. Anyway, I'm going to get to your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. Plus, we're going to talk about what is a sleep divorce and how can it help improve things in the bedroom. Well, we're going to learn a little bit more about that in a moment as well. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Voted best head of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez here, taking your calls, having a late-night conversation with all of America, and I love doing it. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to John, Portland, Maine, WLOB. John, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Primo mío, I'm delighted to talk to you, Rich. Thanks so much.
Bienvenido. Welcome. Thank you, sir.
I caught part of Mark Levin's on it, and I just
a great one.
He called Joe Biden baboso, except he actually mispronounced it slightly, and he said, I don't think it was intentional, but he actually said Joe Biden baboso. I thought baboso might even be better. I just thought it was funny. I thought you'd get a smile.
Oh, that is funny. Let me tell you. Well, first of all, the great one is a mentor of mine. I've spent, half of a decade working with the great one, Mark Levin. I learned so much from him and have nothing but respect for him. He's like family, if you will. And I love the guy, so I'm happy to hear that. And always give kudos to the great one, Mark Levin, who's got a new book out, by the way. And we're going to have him on to talk about the book soon. But I always appreciate that. And the reality is that Joe Biden is a baboso. He really, really is. His mumbling and bumbling and almost drooling, right? Lately, it seems like I'm just waiting for any moment for the drool to just start, falling out of his mouth because, he seems so beyond his prime, if you will, to borrow a line from Don Lemon. But also, I feel like he reminds me in many ways of my dad. My dad had a traumatic brain injury in the last 10 years of his life, but he always remembered being a tough guy. There was always that memory. And I think for Biden, he always remembers being a political gangster, being a corrupt politician. And that's why he's so good at, just flashing his teeth and squinting and just, trying to get out of a tight situation, making a joke or something. And I'm Joe Biden's husband. And, you have a couple of go-to jokes and they work. And you know how to work a crowd because you've done it your whole life. And I think we see that on display, and that's why people are like, no, he's got it all together. But I don't think he really has it all together. And I'm not saying he's falling apart. I'm just saying I just don't think he's par for the course, given the tall order that it is to be president right now. And in many ways, it's a tall order because of him, right? And the policies that he put into place very early on, which I think were mistakes, in my opinion. Now, John, when you hear the term a sleep divorce, what does that mean to you? Have you heard about this before?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't heard that yet. What was that about?
Well, it seems that a sleep divorce is when, you don't sleep in the same bed anymore because of whatever reason, right? That snoring, whatever, getting up to go to the bathroom. And some couples are saying they stopped sleeping in the same bed or even in the same room, and it's made their relationship that much better. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So I figured I'd put that out there for the audience. I don't know how that would work, but, it's interesting nonetheless.
But that idea has been around a long time. I know a lot of older couples say it works for them. I mean, at certain ages, you're less functional and interested in that area of your relationship anyways. So I know for a lot of older people, that does work. I mean, I'm not there yet, but I've heard that for decades. I just didn't know the new term for it, So,
right. Well, and what's interesting here is what this article in particular is talking about. They're saying that people sleeping, literally sleeping in different beds or different rooms is improving their intimacy. Their actual sex life is better because they're not angry at the other person for snoring or elbowing them or stealing the comforters or whatever, which I find interesting. It really is interesting. So very interesting take there. Thank you for the call and for the update. I appreciate it. I always got a lot of love for the great one and for everybody from John's part of town, Portland, Maine, listening on WLOB. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Now, let me give you a little bit of the scoop on this, right? So this is in the New York Post, and it says that her spouse and her got a quote-unquote sleep divorce, and it made their sex lives better than ever. Mara and Christopher Domeland were constantly at each other's throats until they quit sleeping together. Mara, 30 years old, says that she's a stay-at-home mom of 5 kids, and they're toddlers ranging from 2 months old to 10 years old. And so she was perpetually cranky due to a lack of sleep. I can only imagine. And she said most of it wasn't the kids. It was due to her husband's buzzsaw-like snoring. Sound like a wood chipper. I've heard that before. And Christopher, her husband, who works from home, he's a crypto day trader, he was tired of getting elbowed in the back all night for causing a loud, albeit unintentional, ruckus as his wife was sleeping. So These soured sweethearts who'd been together for 11 years decided to split up, but only at bedtime. Sleeping separately has totally improved our relationship, is the quote that came out of this, right? Fascinating. They say they're much happier now. Now there's more physical touch and closeness between us during the day because we're not grumpy and trying to sleep together at night. Who would have known? Mara and Christopher, who've been catching Z's separately on the couch and their bedroom, are snuggled up for, let's see here. It says they had been snuggled up for the last 7 years, and now there's a growing number of couples who are opting for the same thing, which is known as a sleep divorce. I'd never heard of such a thing, although I have heard of, people having separate bedrooms or whatever because of snoring and whatnot. And I myself was a chronic snorer, but I wasn't leaving anywhere. Probably why I'm divorced. Anyway, turns out the couple was way ahead of the game when it comes to this surprisingly hot relationship trend. A new survey conducted by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine found that 1 in 3 married couples in the United States have chosen to sleep separately from their spouse in an effort to improve their marriage. The report also found that millennial and Gen Z couples between the ages of 18 and 42 were the most willing to, agree to a quote-unquote sleep divorce with their spouse. And Gen Xers and baby boomers were more reluctant to get on the sleep divorce bandwagon. Interesting. So this idea, this concept of a sleep divorce is an unconventional nighttime arrangement that sees partners catching Z's at their own bed or bedroom instead of a mutual bed or bedroom. And it's leading to a better night's rest. Now, I don't know if anybody out there does this. I'm not going to criticize you if you do. You might be a genius, like this article is suggesting. These people were ahead of the curve. But very interesting, right? Very interesting. Reminds me of the days when I was a little kid and I would see Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball in a bedroom, but in 2 separate beds. And I'm wondering, maybe that's why they stayed together as long as they did. Or maybe it was because it was Hollywood, because in real life, I think they got divorced. But anyway, your calls and more on this topic and everything else straight ahead. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. Don't go anywhere. I am Rich Valdez. We're coming right back.
Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez. Again, that number, 833-4-VALDEZ, if you want to join us. Getting to your calls momentarily, I wanted to mention something. The last couple of nights, and I just keep getting sidetracked. But let's see here. I think tonight, like right now, is your last chance to see the phenomenon known as the Northern Lights. Actually, you have until tomorrow. The Northern Lights, the last time that you can possibly see them from Michigan, and you can't typically see this stuff in the United States, will be on Thursday. So fascinating. I've wanted to go to Reykjavik, Iceland, to see this forever. because I've heard it's so gorgeous, and I've seen it in photos, but I've heard it's nothing like actually seeing it. So, yeah, you can see the Northern Lights from the U.S. if you're a Michigander, and I know we have plenty that listen to this program. Listen close. You've got until tomorrow to see the Northern Lights. Oh, hold on. Now I got Axio saying, sorry, stargazers. Turns out the Northern Lights won't put on a show on Thursday. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen here, if we are going to see it or we're not going to see it. But again, let's see here. CBS News, Northern Lights will be visible in fewer states than originally forecast. Let's see if they give us a list of those states. I find this very interesting. Maybe you're thinking we should be talking about Christopher Wray, but I would like to see when we could see the Aurora Borealis. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. All right. Alaska, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Maine, as well as parts of Canada, are expected to see the Northern Lights on Wednesday and Thursday. So you had part of your chance today, and you've got until tomorrow. By the way, I wanted to make mention of this at the top of the hour, but I'll do it now. I became a dad on July 13th, 2001, 22 years ago today, technically, right? Because it's past midnight on the East Coast. So happy birthday to my firstborn. Her name is Jada. I love her to death. I called her actually before we started hour number 3. And as predictable, she's such a good girl. She was 21 when she went to sleep on her birthday, turning 22, where I knew she would be fast asleep. I FaceTime her, and she barely wanted to wake up to even talk to me. She's a homebody. She's a great kid. And she's 22. So happy birthday to her. I'll be posting some pictures a little bit later on the social media. Make sure you chime in on the social media. And I wanted to mention something on the social media. Listen to this, and we're going to get to your calls, I promise. 833-4-VALDEZ. But this was really interesting. So yesterday, last week, I'd gotten a call from actually one of the regulars that comes on this program, Brian Leib, who was the executive director of Iranian Americans for Liberty. He recently resigned that position and accepted a new position as the executive director of CASE PAC. And I don't remember exactly what CASE stands for, but it's a pro-Israel organization that poo-poos anti-Semitism, obviously. And he was telling me all about what the acronym stood for, and meeting with another colleague of his, a former State Department official who was deputy envoy for anti-Semitism at the United States State Department. And again, pretty nice conversation with people, just catching up because he happened to be in New York, and we were at the bar at Trump Tower. And I look over to my right, and I see a dog. I don't know what kind of dog. I should have asked. A beautiful dog. Looks like, I don't know, if you mixed a border collie with a husky, the silvery, beautiful dog with blue eyes and small size, probably about 25, 30 pounds, maybe 40 pounds. But this dog was so elegantly poised and sitting at the bar with a martini with 3 large olives in it. And I just had to interrupt this very intellectual conversation on geopolitical affairs and say, excuse me, is there a dog at the bar sipping a martini? And they thought it was funny. And then the one woman goes, the woman that's over there looks like a lady I just did a hit on Fox News with. So I said, I'm going to go over there and take a selfie with the dog because I want a selfie with the dog that's at the bar. The dog looks so cooler than any of us do. So I go over there and I'm like, hey, can I take a picture of your dog? And it was kind of weird. And I don't normally fangirl over animals at bars, but I'd never seen an animal at the bar. So they agreed to do it. They even agreed to take the picture for me. And I posted that on my Instagram. So if you want to see a photo with me and the dog that had the martini, I was drinking the Argentine Malbec. But the dog had a martini in front of it. Now, I'm not going to say that they served the dog a real martini, but I guess it was for the owner. But at the moment I looked over, the martini was there and the dog was there, and it looked like the dog was about to start like slurping up a martini. It was so funny, the cutest thing ever. And I just wanted to share that because when I put the picture up, a lot of people kept saying, who was having the martini, you or the dog? It was clearly the dog that was having the martini, not me. I'm not a martini guy. Anyway, I'm going to get to your calls right now. Let us go to Frank, Evergreen, Montana, KOFI. What's going on, Frank? How are you, sir?
Hey, pretty good. Congratulations on your paternal gift there.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Hey, in the history of Montana, it goes back to, of course, the Spanish and the French. And Spain sold the land to the French, and then the French sold it to the U.S. And during that process, there were what was called the burghers. It was Berger. The French were the burghers, and it was a family on both sides of France and Germany, and they were shepherds. That's what the name means. But they also they brought the cattle up across Minnesota, North Dakota, also up through the Chicago area, the Midwest, and into Montana. And they established many towns. One was Lewistown, that was north of Bozeman, and there was a lot of Catholics in that family and on both sides. And during the rush, for the land rush, that's where a lot of the Germans came in, that side of the family. But there was a lot of gift to Montana with games. There was the sheep and then the wool industry. But they made really good relations with the Native Americans. There wasn't a big slaughter like this. And a lot of them were intermarried. And
yeah,
it's just not.
What's the end result here, Frank?
Oh, it's a better meat that they brought across. It was better than the meat that came in from the Spanish and from the South. The Longhorns wasn't the best for
like
raising
bison.
Of course, the bison were here, but definitely they brought a better beef industry into the area. Yes, and just a lot of people don't know about that. But
yeah, no, I found it interesting. I think I only know a little bit about that because I know that Montana is montaña without the ñ, without the accent on the n, and because of its days and the Spanish influence of everything. Now, I want to ask you, I don't know if you're married or not, but have you ever considered having a sleep divorce, and would you if your spouse or your wife or you snored so much that it would keep you up? Would you agree to like permanently sleep in a different location?
Well, my ex is no longer living. She died of cancer, and
I'm sorry.
I never remarried or anything, but no, I don't know what I would do. I would probably just sleep in another bed if it was just too much of a snoring problem. Then there's no way I could put up with a chainsaw sound right next to my eardrums. Just couldn't do it. Anyway, but that's me.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're down for the sleep divorce, right? The only time you're separate is when you're sleeping. Yeah, fascinating, right? Fascinating, the things that happen with our lives. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. I appreciate the Montana history lesson as well. We're going to get to the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez. We're going to get to your calls momentarily. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. But I want to talk about Kamala Harris. Now, listen, you guys know that you could listen to any of the guests that you may have missed on this program at richvaldezamericaatnight.com, right? So anything that you've missed, richvaldezamericaatnight.com. You could subscribe to the podcast. You can listen to archived shows. But you may not know, and if you don't, I'll remind you, that I have a separate podcast that we record once a week called This Is America with Rich Valdez. And This Is America I've done for years. And it's usually commentary on different things. And I kind of, let loose a little bit since it's a lighter program. And you hear a little bit more of my affinity for hip-hop music and whatnot. And one of the things I like to do is make a little parody every now and again whenever I can. And what came to mind once was to make a song, an intro, if you will, every time we talk about Vice President Kamala Harris, that we should make a song for her, a little theme to get prepared for the entertaining and informative report that's about to follow whenever we mention her. And there was a song some years ago by a great salsa band named, I believe they were called DLG. And, it had a great beat, like, and it had a hook on it. And the hook on the song was in Spanish, and it said, how bad she is, which is a nickname you've heard me use for Kamala Harris. Here, I call her, que mala eres. Now, que mala eres means how bad she is in Spanish, but there's an actual song about it. And I said, what if Count Dalacula were to get us a little bit of that beat and then add a little reverb to my voice and a little echo, and we were to add it all together with my little I think we'd get this. Listen to this. That's the Kamala Harris song. Que mala eres, how bad she is. Que mala eres, que mala eres, que mala. That's Kamala Harris. That's the Kamala Harris song. And we're going to use Vice President Kamala Harris and her theme song every time we talk about her between now and the election in 2024. And if it drives you crazy, then I did my job well. I love to tick people off. Anyway, I want to talk about Kamala Harris because today she made an attempt to explain artificial intelligence, just like she's attempted to explain things like the school bus. I remember the school bus where she was saying, well, it's a bus and it's for school kids and it's yellow and it's big. When she gets really in-depth on her explanations, and I thought I was guilty of oversimplification. Well, she's taken it to a new level. Listen to this.
And I think the first part of this issue that should be articulated is AI is kind of a fancy thing. First of all, it's 2 letters. It means artificial intelligence. But ultimately what it is it's about machine learning. And so the machine is taught. And part of the issue here is what information is going into the machine that will then determine, and we can predict then, if we think about what information is going in, what then will be produced in terms of decisions and opinions that may be made through that process.
All right, so that's Vice President, la Vicepresidenta, Kamala Harris. And she was making this attempt to explain AI by saying, the usual word salad, that it's AI, it's 2 letters, it's machine learning. I mean, obviously restating the obvious. That's literally her specialty. And saying it's kind of a fancy thing. Our vice president. It's funny. Whenever I make a slight on her, somebody always says, but she's vice president. It's not really a big and important position. And I'm thinking, come on, man. I mean, there was, what was his name? The guy that looked like the actor. He was George Bush's VP. Help me out here. No, that's the other George Bush, not Dick Cheney. Dan Quayle, right? Potato. Yeah, so Dan Quayle, who couldn't famously spell potato. I never held that against him because I also cannot spell potato or potato. I think it's Potato. But I think he added an E, and that's why he got it wrong. But again, I've won some spelling bees, but I didn't win them all. Anyway, Dan Quayle was this kind of vice president, I think, where he was. I don't think he was as bad, but they made light of him. They took shots at him. But Kamala Harris is in a league of her own when she says these things, and it's kind of a fancy thing. I mean, come on. I just don't see how she, the few things that you have, the few moments you have to shine and let America know and remind the people know that you are, one heartbeat away from the nuclear codes and running this country. And these are the things that she talks about. AI, well, it's 2 letters. It's artificial intelligence. Thank you, lady. Thank you so much. Kamala Harris, you really are. How bad you are at this job. Oh, boy. Anyway, let's see where we go from here. We take a quick pause, and then we come back to your calls. We're going to go to Michigan, Vermont, West Virginia. We got lots of people lined up. We're going to talk to you guys momentarily. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
To the phones we go. Tommy, Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS. Tommy, what's going on, my brother?
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Valdez. But as you know, since early 2021, the vice president has been the point person for the immigration issue. Yet I believe she has still never visited the border. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, she got down to El Paso, Texas. That was as close as it got for her.
Oh, wow. I'm surprised. Well, I want her to go back to El Paso. You can play that clever jingle you've crafted. She's going to dance to it with the mayor of El Paso and end up winning re-election. But then again, she might be afraid to get dirt on her Gucci loafers and not go back.
Good point, Tommy. I think you might be right about that. And I love hearing your New York accent in West Virginia. Brings me a special kind of joy. Hey, Tommy. Whoa. Love you, man. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody on WCHS in West Virginia. Let's continue with Lori in Colchester, Vermont, WVMT. Lori, go.
Hey, buenos dias. No, buenas noches.
All of the above. Buenas.
All of the above. Thank you, thank you. We don't have much Spanish up here. Quickly, sleep divorce. Great thing. It really is.
Have you done it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my husband and I sleep in different rooms. He likes stimuli, the TV running or the radio running.
And you need silence.
And he snores, but the radio or TV on keeps me up because I get engrossed in it.
Of course. How can you ever sleep if everything's going? It's funny. I used to be like him, and now I'm like you. When I'm out, I got to be out. I'm blackout curtains, eye patches, and everything. Lori, thanks for the call. Everybody, take care. Good night. God bless. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, you keep listening to this station, and I'll be back again tomorrow. I'm Rich Valdez.